Hello and welcome to the program. I am Suren. I am intending to consider a number of exercises as the scientist Adrian V. Clarke has also been suggesting to improve mind control. Question: could people communicate with a spirit world so easily? Answer: only those who believe that it exists could do so. You may have heard that people are talking to God and, interestingly, receiving answers from. Why? Those are the people who believe in God and know that when they question God, He will answer them. Of course, this will make our episode sound almost religious, but it is not a program of the religious kind. It is simply to analyze the story in the scriptures. When one asks God a question, could the devil answer one instead of God himself? Remember, there are cults, Christian-based cults, wherein members are encouraged to think that when one asks questions of God, that the devil may answer you. And others would advise you not to question the Spirit. In other words, just keep on sleeping. How can this be true? First of all, one needs to be convinced that when you are talking to an imagined deity, or completely convinced that you are talking to a real God, true God, would trigger you to ask the questions of that person of higher standing. The answer can only come from that person, not from the opposer. When I ask a question of one of my students, say named John, and Mary answers me back in place of John, that would not be accepted. Similarly, one needs to convince oneself that one is able to control matter, then is going to be able to control anything. When I was a child, I have spoken of it to a group of people, as I said it in an earlier episode. I experienced sitting on air, although I have asked my brother to remove the chair underneath me, and he was unwilling to do so, and even asking our mother that his brother was silly, asking to take the chair off under him. However, eventually he was convinced to pull the chair off from under me, discovering that I was sitting on air. It seems that children are easier to convince or become convinced that such powers exist more than the adults would believe. However, when they spoke about God that existed and was always ready to punish us young boys, made me feel that such God could not exist. I had to wait a long time to discover that such powers could at all exist and were available to us all humans. However, members of course, when one considers the Bible, it is said that about what Jesus spoke of by saying, except you become as little children, you cannot see the kingdom of God. Matthew chapter 18, verse 3. When I was a child, I was not quite convinced that God existed. But eventually, when I became more cognizant and followed what my friends were telling me, that one could talk to God and He would respond, I became more convinced that his response would be a welcomed idea if he really existed. However, as we all know, some are easily convinced and believing that his response would be primarily in action, and probably he would move the world if it was asked of him to do this, as it happened to scientist Adrian. I was in two different worlds, in between two different ideologies, because at the time of my childhood, I was living in a place where both Christianity and Islam were practiced. And I needed much to study and convincing that God really existed. But in respect to the scientist Clark, I shall consider his listings as well, because he says that he asked him what his role in life should be, and he, God, told him to build spaceships way back in 1939. Just basic research was in progress in space travel at that time, and he was convinced that God told him to train himself for space vehicle design work, which he eventually did. He says he began at that time when 11 years old. He was drawing spaceships, and in fact, that was like many other boys' interests. Also, my interest. And later, I was illustrating spaceships, imagining myself living in spacecraft and traveling from one planet to the other, especially after my experience by the holes on the roadside. However, scientist Clark helped to design of the Saturn V moon vehicle, working on the first NASA Skylab scheduled to be launched in 1973. And he believes that he has asked God to help him attain an education, which was a big, very big request on his part. He explains that he got responded by presenting him with a 4-year college scholarship, which took him through to ABS in physics. But even more, because he was also presented with the GI Bill after serving in the Navy for 3 years, so the pathway that he has been suggested and that he chose was the right course for him, eventually, all those years ago. A book was published with the title Cosmic Mysteries. I don't know if you are familiar with it. And obviously that he has read and he changed in the God concept. Feeling universal intelligence or energy intelligence were better terms. Therefore, when he used the term God, he meant much more than the religious God. And when I discovered my own standpoint, I was fully convinced that the religious God was not for me, especially during my youth, when I was subjected to ideas of a cultist group of people. And I was convinced that God, which was not a religious one, was able to answer any questions, exactly like the scientists' questions, with actions and ideas. I believe that we can be mentally linked with the universal intelligence to move an object. He says, late one night, when I was in close contact with the psychic world, I had a strong desire to move an object with my mind. I asked for help to move a small plastic toy tile which was laying on the hearth. I concentrated hard on the tile, which was 1/2 inch in length, trying to cause it to rise, and it did, but not exactly like I had in mind. I heard a voice, like my own mind speaking to me, which said, "If you want the tile move, get up and move it." And I did. Thus, the tile moved. Similarly, I have discovered that when I held a compass from my father's army days, the compass needle was moving frantically around the clock. It never stopped making me believe that I had something metallic or magnetic on me, but which was not the case. However, I discovered that when I left the compass on the table and moved into a different direction, the needle's positive end was still pointing at me. No matter where I moved from right to left or left to right, what I have been able to show others, no one, and particularly all the adults, would not believe me and thought that I was involved in some kind of magic trick. I wish I was, but I was not. Just like A. Clark, the scientist, did. I too gained much from this experience that the natural way of psychokinesis for the psychic signal comes through to the person or to the brain in the form of a coded signal of light, giving the person the idea to move the object. Remember that there are natural laws which must be followed when the mind moves the matter. The stronger adherence to the natural law, which must be obeyed when practicing mind over matter. And it is to be fully convinced that one can move that mountain, and it will be moved. All we need to do is this. Unless you are convinced that you can move out of bed or a chair, you cannot. If, however, you are convinced that you can make the bed rise through the air with you in it, you can, and the bed will rise as requested. Is it really possible? Try and see. If we are convinced that we need to move objects, they can be moved. Objects that have been most prominent and are able to move the molecules of a person's body, which can heal and keep him or her healthy. One needs to be convinced that one can be healthy, and one will be. Convincing yourself that you can be healed, you will be. But it is easier for most of humans to be convinced that God can heal us, which He can. So the same results are obtained. When we are convinced that God will move an object if we ask Him, we might think, what useful purpose will this psychokinesis accomplish? Question mark. Perhaps because we included God in our activities, and so we are more likely to expand our powers in moving objects. As he writes, another very important reason for depending upon a higher intelligence to move objects is because we need more than a human intelligence to safely conduct psychokinesis. There are meditation exercises to develop the reception. Meditation is a method which is often used by various religious and spiritualist groups to improve ESP or to contact with the energy intelligence. Meditation may not be more than a unique process for helping insomnia and assist one to sleep. To meditate, one needs to relax the body and mind, as for instance, trying to think about a void. When we think about nothing, we go into sleep. Our meditations can only be beneficial to many people, still keeping them awake, as we can now consider. First of all, you may need to sit in a comfortable chair, relaxing your body and mind. Then close your eyes and do not try to think about anything in particular. Then turn these thoughts around in and look for colors and pictures in your mind. These patterns are not produced because light filters through the eyelids to stimulate the retina of the eye. As we all know, when closing our eyes in a dark room without any light, and we could still see colors and patterns. After closing our eyes for a little while, we similarly begin to see colors and patterns. These patterns are usually in random shapes, in a kaleidoscopic fashion. Now and then we see a picture, a scene, or even an event. Now follow these pictures as they show up in your mind. These pictures may then begin to develop into a consistent story, or even yet another pattern, which may be a prediction of some future event, or just a repeat of something that has happened to us in the last few days, or some time ago. When we are watching these patterns, our mind will also begin to race. It can be primarily the subconscious or unconscious part of the mind beginning to function. We may probably consider this as the imagination, if you like. This imagination may begin to develop a dreamlike storyline without any conscious effort. Often, when we have a common problem we may be trying to resolve, we can use the meditation technique, which causes many possible solutions to the problem to run through our minds. And one of these answers will be the correct one, and probably the best one. As we meditate, we should be using the intelligence and knowledge of our minds with all the capability within us. We should continually ask, if you like, the Holy Spirit to guide our subconscious mind, says Adrian Clark, and conscious mind arriving at the correct answer. When we have exhausted all our intellectual capabilities and feel that we have arrived at the best answer or solution, we can assume that this is the right answer to our question, while all the time remaining open-minded and considering possible changes as the Spirit guides, so to say. If we are wrong in judging the correct answer, the Spirit may continue to speak through our unconscious so that we cannot continue to proceed in the wrong direction. In short, meditation is a method of obtaining answers to questions. But most importantly, we should take action using psychic powers given to us by the creative spirit, based upon the best answers. We must not consciously judge the information. When a question was asked, when information is sorted, and an answer is desirable from the universal intelligence, if there is the possibility of an answer to the question in the literature, we should seek the answer therein first. We need to read and study and also talk to other individuals and consider their contributions. As we gain information, which may be the answer we seek, but again may not, we should not consciously judge, assume, accept, or reject the material being received. And in the Bible, Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 reads, "Judge not, so that you will not be judged." This may normally be applied to the judging of people as to whether or not they are morally good or bad. This could also very aptly apply to the judging of information received by our brains. We should not judge the information we receive, such as the philosophies and religions of this world, and many people's ideas of possible answers to our problems, but file the information in the brain, and so we can listen to the various comments of people, study the teachings of the Bible or other gurus. And from these we may form some or our own opinions. It is better to be open-minded. Simply ask God, Yahweh, or Jehovah, or whomever you think of to formulate our thinking, without prejudice, without assumptions, through the workings of the Holy Spirit, who we believe can exert influence on the subconscious mind, that forming beliefs without us realizing it, until someone asks us what we believe. Then we can discover within our minds and established beliefs placed somehow by God, using our ESP ability. E. Lewis Russell has been a great clairvoyant, and he says, "You must change your mental attitude so that no matter what anyone does or says, it will seem neither right, wrong, but just something that is." When we meditate to establish contact with higher intelligence or God, then allow the Holy Spirit to formulate our beliefs. This way, we can master great powers, not in a selfish sense. The primary result of an improved communication link is apparently psychokinesis from an outward viewpoint, since the primary characteristics of many great psychics have been their ability to heal others, walk under water or air, changing objects from one form to another, and move objects through the air. Less abused powers gained by an improved communication link with the universal mind are primarily the control of self, desire to use psychic powers to help those without such powers, and desire not to advertise these powers. Psychic control by suggestion. This is an interesting subject. As you know, there are many well-authenticated cases for us to doubt that at least in some instances, the mind can control matter. This evidence now seems to prove that the conscious mind, in a way never before imagined, can also control our body functions and even control severe nerve sensations such as pain. Have you heard the saying, pray your pain away? Sheila Ostrander and Lynn Schroeder report an experiment conducted in Bulgaria. Although there is some semblance to hypnosis, there is one major difference. In hypnosis, the hypnotist has control of the subject's mind. The subject is in a state of deep sleep or trance, and is not usually aware of what is going on around him or her. In subjectology or suggestology, the subject is in complete control of his mind and is aware at all times of what is occurring around him and what he is doing. Semblance is that just as there is a hypnotist in hypnosis, there is a leader in suggesting or suggestology who helps the subject attain and keep the frame of mind necessary for him or her to make the ultimate use of his or her mind. This technique was used in Bulgaria for many forms of healing. But probably the most dramatic experiments were in the use of the mind control for anesthesia in surgery. The first major operation using mind control as the only form of anesthesia was performed in Bikova, in Bulgaria, in August 24, 1965. The patient requested of Dr. Lozanov, Bulgarian scientist, who devised the techniques that suggestion to be used for anesthesia in hernia operation, which he was to undergo. Minor surgery had previously been accomplished with the use of mind control as the only anesthesia, but never anything of this magnitude. This operation would require at least an hour to perform. The technique having been explained to them, Dr. Ivan Ankalpov and Dr. Vili Vasiltanev agreed to perform the operation, and which would not only be televised but also filmed for complete documentation. He was fully awake during the entire procedure and clearly remembered each step of the operation. The patient had at no time felt any pain. He was able to laugh and joke with the doctors as they cut a 2-inch incision in his abdomen, removed the hernia, and sutured the incision. He not only felt no pain, but through mind control of his blood flow, he was able to restrict the blood to the area of the operation so that there was little blood loss. His recuperation was rapid. He had given his body the suggestion to that effect. The incision healed more rapidly than normal. I personally have experienced the same by myself many years ago, when I have undergone through a prostatectomy. Although they have applied a minute amount of anesthesia to ease the possible pain. And indeed, I have helped myself through suggestology to create an atmosphere of calm and peacefulness. With positive thinking and the operation, which lasted about 4 hours, I was taken to an ICU unit, and I have been instructed to use a button to inject morphine to assist myself when I felt pain. But I was determined not to feel any pain at all, and had no blood loss during the operation. Shortly after, I got up with all the medications and drips dangling from the top of a pole which was attached to me and my bedding at the time, and walked into the bathroom when several hospital staff started to run in panic towards me. The nurses particularly shouting, "Sir, please don't get up. You just came out of the operating table." I was intending to have a shower, and they said that they would do all the cleaning for me. Short while afterwards, several doctors came to examine me and discovered that I was doing extremely well. The operating doctor, the surgeon, later visited me specifically, saying that I was doing extremely well, and he was surprised, so that I could go home the next day. Remember, they were suggesting even to my then partner that I would probably be staying in the hospital for a week. But there was no need for it, as I already have organized my mind and my brain to heal me as fast as possible, so that I could do things as I needed to without a break. My partner was extremely surprised. 2 weeks later, stitches were removed. Many such experiments have shown that an atmosphere of calm and peacefulness is of utmost importance to the success of this technique. It is indeed necessary that the patient be able to attain a feeling of deep relaxation, while at the same time remaining fully awake and in complete control of his mind and mental faculties. This is the same state of mind that is most conducive to success in any exercise of ESP abilities or other psychic powers. The benefits can be obtained from mastery of this form of psychokinesis, not only from use in surgery, both major and minor, but to assist us when dealing with strains of daily life. Scientific research, according to scientist Clark, produces very convincing evidence. The research team in North Carolina has been trying to find the evidence of something the carpenter from Bethlehem nearly 2,000 years ago mentioned, that there was life after death. Research have uncovered evidences of Psychokinesis. They have investigated many unusual happenings which were typical of those recorded throughout the history. Now, they have not approved nor disproved that a human being's soul or any other part of him lives after his body dies, but they are convinced that such phenomena has extrasensory perception, ESP, and objects flying through the air for no apparent reason. Organization named as Psychical Research Foundation was founded in 1961. The director, W.G. Roll, a graduate of Oxford University, and others connected with the foundation say that part of the research or reason for their slow progress is that many scientists think that they are the type of studies which can be considered as a waste of time. Apparently, the big chunk of money used to finance scientific research finds its way to the foundation. We don't know. Some of the work of the foundation has been investigation of poltergeist, the unexplained movement of the objects. Those connected with this foundation are reluctant to talk about such studies for reasons and fear that reporters will see the work as an unscientific ghost chasing, and because they are afraid the information on specific families may lead to crank telephone calls and or other pranks. Form of psychokinesis, which may be controlled by exercising this technique, is the case of poltergeist occurrences. This is usually destructive, is random moving and breaks of objects, and is often associated with a mentally disturbed young person. Just think about it. In Olive Hill, in Kentucky, in 1969, poltergeist caused destruction through 5 houses, and the family members felt emotionally destroyed. A couple of psychical researchers from Durham, North Carolina, associated with the Duke University, watched the houses for several days, and before leaving, they verified the occurrences and said they were due to psychokinesis. The preternatural event occurred around 12-year-old grandson of the family. His mother was a member of Jehovah's Witnesses, following the teachings that such unexplained happenings can only be the work of demons. Because of this belief that the two researchers returned to Durham, and they advised a program of health based on personal study by psychiatrist and physician. The current, beginning on November 15th, 1968, Henderson Branch House, where the elder Callahan or Callihans have lived about 2 years or so, it was on December 7 that the weird movements first began in the new house. The weekend following the visit of the two researchers was marked by 2 more nights of violent movements. The researchers and others agreed that the movements coincided with the activity and emotions of the grandson. After the boy's parents isolated him in their home, movements started there and followed him into the homes of the 2 uncles. The first occurrence in Henderson Branch was a shocker, with only a few who know about glass in mirrors and picture frames begin to snap. The first bad night in the second house included manifestation of a pale, thin man. Mrs. Callahan, who said they saw the operation. We're sure that it resembled her brother, who died 13 years ago. At first doubtful what he had heard, the movements in the house convinced the father that something was going on. He considered it to be a curse. Remember, we are talking about a Jehovah's Witness family. The 2 researchers, W.G. Roll and John Stump, of the Institute of Psychology Research, left this opinion on the happenings, which they termed typical poltergeist phenomena. We have come up against this kind of process in other investigations of this type, which we refer to as psychokinesis or PK effect. This term refers to an energy that, in all likelihood, everybody possesses. It is similar to other human faculties, but with most of us, it operates on a confined scale and is not noticeable. It is a natural and normal faculty or force which, however, is not under the conscious control of anyone. No one wants or will these things to happen. Correct? Right. Now, Roll says most poltergeist cases involve a so-called agent, someone whose presence seems to be connected with the movement of the objects. That was the case, said Roll, in Miami, where objects reportedly had been flying off of the shelves in a warehouse in which novelty items were stored. Break-ins were always found to occur in the presence of anxiety-plagued young Cuban who worked in the warehouse. Roll checked the warehouse for fraud and found no wires or other devices that could cause objects to fly through the air. He said he placed several specific objects on shelves in positions where it would be impossible for them simply to fall. Roll later said he examined the objects in advance, and they were normal. But even these flew through the air, and he saw one of the object in pieces from where it had been positioned. No one was in the warehouse area who could have thrown the objects to the floor. Roll then said that the breakings remain a mystery. In Jacksonville, Florida, for instance, 2 investigators from the foundation visited a house where an apparition reportedly had been seen several times. One investigator, who was Dr. John Outley, an electrical engineering professor at Duke University, said he saw a glowing light about the size of football at the foot over bed. A few seconds before, he had seen nothing. Then it disappeared. Although the Durham research team has neither proven nor unproven that there is life after death, they have very firm evidence that unknown forces were at work and capable of moving objects and producing lights, which means that these unexplained events can be caused by forces in the psychic universe, thus adding to our evidences that a link-up with a psychic universe can give us powers to move objects with our minds. We are not talking about devils and evil beings. As the evidences of the psychic universe continue to increase, more and more people in professional occupations are observing and investigating unusual occult phenomena, including many cases of objects moving by unknown, mysterious forces, not necessarily intelligent by themselves. Possible subconscious psychokinesis, or PK. Robert A. Bradley, a medical doctor, has observed several cases of PK, one of which occurred one day when he reached for a heavily weighted cigar lighter which was sitting on a table. He lived for many years in an old house, which many times showed evidence of psychic occurrences. As his hand was near the lighter, he was amazed to see the lighter mysteriously rise above the table and move about a foot from his richly outstretched hand. Then he saw the object silently come to rest on its side on the table. He recovered from his initial shock of seeing the lighter move under its own power. He examined very closely, but could find nothing abnormal about it. When he deliberately pushed it over, it fell with a noisy metallic click. Not silently as it did after it floated away from him. He had no explanation for the floating lighter, but let us raise some questions. Why did the lighter move when Dr. Bradley's hand approached it the first time, and not the second time? Could Dr. Bradley have influenced the PK of the lighter the first time without conscious thought, but influenced the lighter the second time with conscious thought? Question mark. Dr. Bradley had a deep interest in psychic issues. Therefore, he may have been linked with the psychic universe, causing the lighter to move under the subconscious control of his mind. But when he began exercising normal mental control, the lighter moved at the push from his finger. With faith as of a child, feat of PK and other spiritual miracles may be even more possible. As with a child, psychic matters are more common, but adults usually try to convince the child that psychic experiences are all imagination. This naturally causes, normally, the children to reject spiritual experiences until they no longer have psychic experiences at all, or ignore those which they may have. Dr. Bradley observed several other PK phenomena while living in his old haunted house. One of these was observed when he returned from a shopping trip. He found the reception hall in shambles. He reported that plants were uprooted, dirt was scattered about, and decorative furnishings were toppled over. Again, he could find no satisfactory explanation for the chaos, except that some powerful forces from the occult realm must have been active. Many other times, the psychic causes were evident as lamps would click on for no apparent reason. Not just one lamp at a time, but two lamps would come on simultaneously, since both lamps were on the same circuit as a TV set, as in those days, which was already on. When the lamps mysteriously came on, they did not come on from a common switch being turned on. When examined closely, one lamp switch was on the second position of the three-way switch, and the other was on the third position. Those persons present with Dr. Bradley, when the lights came on, heard no clicks, but manual operation produced clearly audible clicks. At another time, when electrical work was being performed on Dr. Bradley's haunted house, a yellow light came on, which did not at once seem supernormal, since an electrician was working on the wirings. But further investigation showed the electrician to be in a supply room and not tampering with the electrical circuits in a period of about 1 month. Bradley's experience and strange case of one or of two bedroom lamps going on spontaneously 3 different times and went off mysteriously once. Well, one evening, when a lamp lit up, a popping sound or popping noise was heard on the ceiling. Then other lights came on or went off for no apparent reason, except psychological forces during this stage of psychokinetic operation of the lights. These are but a few of the many psychic experiences told by Dr. Bradley. We seem to have encountered many more unexplainable events then most people. These experiences may have been caused by Dr. Bradley because he was subconsciously willing them to occur. Or is it possible that the grown-up men are similar to the way the mind controls involuntary body functions, such as blood pressure, body temperature, heartbeat rate? Question mark. Medical sciences studying how the mind subconsciously or unconsciously controls the body functions, and as the science gains more knowledge, we have greater confidence in our ability to be masters of our physical bodies. Why should we not also gain confidence in our ability to control psychic phenomena as we observe these psychic events? It's a question. Everything affecting the senses should be utilized to increase knowledge, confidence, and understanding of the sensitive or the psychic and physical world. Peculiar yet normal events can stimulate thinking that an answer to a question can be obtained through use of the intelligence and the imagination. Could some occurrences be a method of high intelligence contacting us? One might be psychologically affected so that one could not see things, but one could have serious thoughts received as a message, which can add to one's confidence in psychic powers by analyzing what has happened. Higher intelligence contacting us may use communication methods which require use of our senses and our reasoning. Psychic happenings are often associated with people who are expecting them anyway, which indicates that people therefore trigger PK feats. The unconscious mind, which controls many bodily functions without conscious effort, could also control psychokinesis and psychic phenomena. Subconscious mind of a skilled athlete is trying to control the body muscles more accurately, and the conscious mind can control them. Take this as an example. Bowler will try to control his body, steps, arms, and hinge the same way each time he aims for a strike. Sometimes he will have a strike, while other times he will leave some pins standing, even though he will consciously try to deliver the ball in exactly the same way each time. The subconscious mind will have to develop confidence that it can control the body before the bowler becomes proficient in delivering the ball. The mind will then learn how to move each body muscle in new detail to control the ball, so that it will roll to the exact spot required to obtain a strike on 10 pins. If the subconscious mind learns to do what the conscious mind cannot, in control of body functions, possibly the subconscious mind can be trained to control PK by moving objects not physically connected to the brain the way muscles are connected, but otherwise. There may be parallels between learning how to control a bowling ball and learning how to control PK. There may be some rules of the PK game that must be followed by top 10 skills in PK. To establish a set of rules for a game which is as nebulous as PK or other psychic phenomena may seem impossible, but there may be a way to arrive at the rules. All of the rules seem to be patterned after those taught by the world's most powerful psychic, who was no other than Jesus the Christ. These rules are summarized in the well-known Golden Rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If one cannot follow this rule, he may still have psychic powers, but this does not seem to fit the key histories of the world's great psychics, who seem to have deep concern for their fellow men. One of the less known psychics seemed to be following the role of helping others was K. Kuhlman, who seems to have psychic powers to heal, which causes people to fall over, and then she touches them again in the healing service. She has been reported to leave literally many scores of people lying in the aisles. Whenever she touched a person to heal him or her, he would bend over on the floor as if knocked out by her touch. However, when a woman was helped up off the floor and asked how she felt, she said, "Wonderful. It was a sort of electricity. I was just illuminated." For some strange reason, all who fell were adults, who were followed close behind Kuhlman. And as she touched a small boy, he just stood there grinning while she moved on to the next person. Two Catholic priests standing on the stage where Miss Kuhlman had preached fell over and touched them. One of them, the Reverend John Lane, a Jesuit, is an associated pastor also at the Holy Family Church in Chicago, and many such healing sessions have taken place there with positive results. As we obtain control of greater psychic forces, we need also to practice the correct rules so that others may benefit from our special gift. Where a person will have a special psychic talent to heal, another will have the ability to move objects with his mind, and another will develop the ability to obtain an information from the unobstructed universe. Several cases of having ideas and asking for confirmation have been related already. Another one with the universal mind was when the scientist asked God the relationship between gravity and the psychic forces. The ideas which he received in moving the brain cells so that the ideas were constructed in his mind. He asked a basic question, like, what is gravity? He writes, I waited for an answer. I doodled on the corner of a sheet of paper without being aware of what I was drawing. I drew 3 circles representing an atom containing a nucleus and 2 electrons. Then drew 2 over each of the electrons that would seem to press the electrons towards the nucleus. After the drawing was complete, he says, I became aware of it. I wondered if it contained an answer about gravity. I understood the symbols to mean or indicating that these represented the basic psychic forces which press matter together in the physical universe. Gravity is not a pulling force between physical bodies like us on planet Earth, on the ground, but it is a result of the psychic force pushing the physical universe together. Gravity is always natural, characteristic of the physical body, because all physical objects display a certain amount of psychic material of the unobstructed universe, which creates an imbalance around the object. Lost the psychic material, trying to return to the original volume which the object occupies, produces a psychic force on the object. When we stand on the Earth's surface, on the ground, we say gravity holds us with the force of 1g. However, it may be possible that this nebulous psychic force is pressing down upon us with the force of 1g. The reason that the same force is not pushing on the bottoms of our feet is because the earth is in the way or interferes with the force. The more massive the object, the greater the shielding effect for the psychic forces. That is a greater push, or using higher G's. If we can redirect the psychic forces, we can cause objects to rise or move. We can even lift ourselves by cutting off psychic forces, pressing us to the earth, and allowing psychic forces against the bottoms of our feet to lift us. However, we can also move objects by releasing photons, a subject we'll talk about more later. He apparently conquered with PK. There was a well-known psychic with a name Doc Anderson in Roswell, Georgia, who used very simple techniques to control psychokinetic forces, which helped him to gain fame and success. He could use his mind to win about anything by thinking what he wanted to happen, and it would. He was very successful at using psychokinesis, while boxing when he won too many fights and could not find more challenges. Therefore, he would turn off his psychokinetic ability to give his opponents a chance to win. Just consider. He used psychokinesis to lift tremendous weights, which gained him the title of World Weightlifting Champ. He could lift several men, a car, hundreds of pounds of dumbbells, and perform many other superhuman feats by simply thinking, and that psychic forces assisted him. He would think very hard about what he wanted to happen, and it would. He had demonstrated his psychic abilities by shattering a glass with his mind. By his human mind controlling psychokinetic forces, he mentally visualized the glass being broken so realistically that the glass actually broke. If Doc Anderson can utilize psychic forces, so can anyone else who follows the techniques of developing confidence and concentration. Although he has gained fame and wealth, he uses his powers with discretion, primarily in trying to help others by assistance of his source of power. He never took any money from anybody, even though he has spent about 1 hour talking to them. For instance, when conversing with Jerry, because he did not feel that Jerry needed his special abilities, Jerry was a scientist who has been convinced by people like Anderson that his own psychic experiences, the psychokinesis, was available for anyone's use. He stares at a glass of water to obtain psychic control. Just imagine. Olaf Jonsson, or Johnson, an engineer and one of the most richly tested psychics. Native of Sweden and well known, therefore, his powers in levitating objects, predicting the future, solving mysteries clairvoyantly, and performing unbelievable tricks with decks of cards, which he never touches. Jonsson came to this country, that is, the States, for the purpose of having his psychic abilities tested scientifically. Tests are being conducted in the US as well as in Sweden, so that the credibility of Jonsson's feats have been well established. Now, he believed that the universe was purposeful with a divine plan. And the best technique for reaching this complete satisfaction comes from a connection with God. Jehovah, if you like, is through personal meditations. He believed that every person had psychic ability, and if he will only develop it, he does not recommend the use of things like Ouija boards, instead recommending filling a glass with water and setting it on the table before you, staring at the water and erasing all thoughts from your mind while thinking of nothing but just concentrating on the water. Once the ability has been achieved, and through this ability to let the subconscious mind rise above the conscious, the glass of water is no longer necessary. It is merely a physical object on which to focus your attention, Johnson is of the opinion that a person may derive many important benefits from this heightened psychic ability, a great calm and peace that suffuses one's thought and makes him harmonious with the universe. The sense of harmony places the minor distractions of earthly life in their proper perspective and enables sensitive to be serene and tranquil wherever they may be. As if much of this episode was handed, says the scientist V. Clark, was handed to me by the universal mind, God. But true story was given to me at this time, just as I was concluding. It is an uncanny feeling to have a complete stranger start telling me a strange but factual story, which seemed to be exactly the evidence I was seeking that the psychic forces produce light in the physical universe. Light being produced in the physical world from signals in the psychic world was confirmed in my mind by a very unusual response I received from a request to the universal mind, or God, for a confirmation of this idea. The light I felt is the link, and possibly the only link, between this universe and the psychic universe. Light is required when a psychic receives a message. Light is the required importance when a person of faith is healed. And light is seen when a dead person appears in an image of his physical body in a controlled manner, so that the object is pushed by the departing photons. From a scientific viewpoint, he says, he has a very little supporting evidence to call the ideas we have spoken about gravity theory, because the ideas are not based upon experiments or observation, but only upon the possibility that they could have been given to him by a higher intelligence who understands much more about gravity than we do. And so, this episode comes to an end. Thank you for watching, and we will meet again by the next episode. Until then, I say again, keep smiling and be happy. Thank you.